Hello everybody on lesterbanks.com. This is Daniel and welcome to my new tutorial. In today's tutorial we are going to have some fun with shapes. Let's take a look at a short preview I have prepared.
Audio Jungle.
So as you can see, we are going to have some fun inside of After Effects with some shape layers and solids to create all of these fun animations. So let's get started and open a new composition. I'm going to click Ctrl N on the keyboard. I'm working in 1080p, 25 frames per second, and I'm going to create a composition which is 1 second long. I'm going to call this comp flash and click OK. Inside this comp, I'm going to create a new solid, so Ctrl Y on the keyboard. I'm going to make it comp size and make sure it is a white solid. I'm simply going to call it white and click OK. Using the page down key, I'm going to skip forward 2 frames. Now hold Alt on your keyboard and click once the right rectangular brackets on the keyboard to trim the layer to this point. Now up here in my toolbar, I'm going to select the star tool and double click it to create a star in my composition. I'm going to make this star yellow and mess around with its settings a little bit. Let's open the polystar and go into the polystar path. Let's decrease the inner radius to something like 100, maybe even a bit lower, like 70, and increase the outer radius to 3000. So we have a very large star. Now let's increase the outer roundness just a little bit, and I'm going to move the star just a little bit to the top left corner. Let's trim this layer as well, so hold Alt and left rectangular brackets, skip 2 frames forward and Alt and right rectangular brackets. Now I'm going to duplicate this white solid, and with this new solid selected, Ctrl Shift Y, let's make this solid yellow. Yellow as our star, so I'm simply going to pick its color and click OK. I will even call it yellow and click OK. Now select both of these layers and move them so we have a simple sequence, one comes after the other. Duplicate the star, so with the star selected, Ctrl D on the keyboard and move it a few frames forward, create a little gap over here. And with the star selected, I'm going to rotate it just a little bit, so open the contents and go into the polystar path and just increase the rotation a bit, so we have this sort of star flashing on our screen. Let's now create a new star, and this time I'm going to make it more of an orange star. Let's open the polystar path again. This time I'm going to decrease the inner radius and increase the inner roundness. Now let's decrease the points from 5 to 4. With the shape layer selected, I'm going to go up here and add this transformer, which is right under the offset path, decrease its value and set the amount to like -80. So we get this cool shape. I'm also going to decrease the outer radius because I don't need it to be such a big shape. I'm also going to change the rotation just a bit. Let's duplicate the polystar. Let's make the second one not orange but white. So I'm going to open the polystar and in the fill options I'm going to change it to white. Now close the fill options and open the polystar path, and let's decrease the inner radius and the outer radius just a bit, so we have such a white filling inside. And now let's animate the scale of this shape. Click S on the keyboard and click on the stopwatch to add a keyframe to the scale property. Move a few frames forward and add another keyframe, and simply make sure that the first keyframe is set to 0. Now I'm going to select both of these keyframes, right click, keyframe assistance and easy ease, or you can also click F9 on the keyboard. And I'm going to open the graph editor, select this handle, move it to the left, and select this handle and move it to the left as well. Now let's trim this layer like this, and like this, maybe shorten the animation just a bit, and move the layer a few frames forward. Maybe put the layer a bit to the side, maybe somewhere around here. Duplicate this layer, move it to the other side, and offset it in time as well. And maybe change its color if you like. So go into the contents and change the color of the first polystar. Go into the fill and maybe change it to be a red star. Click OK. And so you have a fun flashing transition. Let's go ahead and create another kind of flash. So let's create a new comp and call it flash number 2. And now we are going to start with a star shape. So double click on the star tool to create a star. I'm going to open the polystar and go into the polystar path and change the points from 5 to 3, and then add the same transformer from the add options, and I'm going to again decrease it and maybe make it a little bit smaller. I think I will off-center it. And let's keyframe the inner and outer radius. Move like 10 frames forward and keyframe it again. Make sure that the first set of keyframes is set to 0 and the other keyframes are set to a much larger number like this, so it fills most of the screen. Create another set of keyframes after a few frames and just fill the whole screen with this star. Just keep increasing the inner and outer radius till the whole screen is filled with this shape. And so we have an animation which goes like this, a rapid expansion of our shape. I'm going to select all of my keyframes, right click, keyframe assistance, easy ease, and now go into the graph editor and create the same look as I did before. Move all of the handles to the left, exit the graph editor mode, and we have an animation which goes like this. Now to make it a little bit better looking, I'm going to make it a bit faster. So I'm going to select all of these keyframes, and while holding Alt on my keyboard, I'm going to simply move them closer together. So now the animation lasts for 10 frames. And it looks like this. Now let's create a new solid, and I'm going to make it a white solid and make sure it is comp size and click OK, and make sure that this solid starts when my animation ends, so it goes from orange to white in a flash. And after 5 frames I'm going to make this white solid disappear as well, so hold Alt on the keyboard and click once the right rectangular bracket so it disappears, and make the orange star disappear as well. So trim the layer to this point. So that's another kind of nice flashy transition you can make using shape layers and solids. Let's create the third kind of flash, the one which has the most detail. Let's begin by creating a new comp, Ctrl N on the keyboard, and again call it flash, this time number 3, and click OK. I'm going to start by selecting the pen tool and selecting a yellow color and simply create a triangle which looks like this with a very sharp edge over here. And now deselect it, select the pen tool again, create a similar triangle which goes to another direction. Again, make sure you have this sharp edge kind. Maybe move this one a bit to the side and do the same triangle a few times. Maybe this one will be a bit wider like this. Create some detail in your triangles. Shape which is very long. Play a little bit with the spacing of these shapes so it looks good. We've got lots of empty space over here, so let's try to handle it by opening this shape and go into the contents. Open the shape number 1 and select the path. And now simply select both of these points and maybe move them down a little bit. Try to make it a little bit more even spaced. Maybe something like this. And now select all of these layers by simply clicking Ctrl A on the keyboard. Trim them all to be like 4 frames. And now let's create another shape which will contain only 2 lines this time. So we've gone down from 5 lines to 2 lines. And again make one which is wide and the one which is narrow. Maybe the longer one will be the narrow one. And the short one will be a little bit wider. And now just select both of these shapes and move them forward a little bit. Let's create a new solid and make it a white solid. I'll call it simply flash, and make it a very short solid for just a few frames to fill in this blank space between all of these rays and all of these rays and both of these. And now select both of these rays and make them shorter as well, so simply trim these layers. And again we've got a nice flash which lasts for a few frames. Maybe create another yellow solid which will end our flash. Put it right after both of these rays. Maybe make both of these rays come after all of these rays and the flashes come one after the other. Maybe it will look better and create a blank space between them. Let's see how this looks. Well, to me it looks pretty good, and this is a very nice transition. Let's create a new comp, call it smoke, cloud, and I'm going to select my ellipse tool, hold shift on the keyboard to make sure it is a perfect circle, and I'm going to make it blue. And using the reposition anchor point tool, I'm simply going to place the anchor point in the middle of the circle. Now with this shape selected, I'm going to click Ctrl Home to center it and maybe make it a little bit brighter like this. Now inside of the contents, I'm going to duplicate the ellipse a few times and simply move it to create some cloudy looking shape like this. So we've got our cloud, and I'm going to reposition the anchor point again and center it again. Let's rename the layer to cloud. Let's select this layer and animate its scale. So click S on the keyboard with the layer selected. Make sure that you are at the beginning of the timeline and click once on the stopwatch to add a keyframe, and add another keyframe after 10 frames. Make sure that the first keyframe is set to 0. And now select both of these keyframes and right click keyframe assistance and easy ease. In the graph editor, again move both of these handles to the left, and so we've got an animation which looks like this. Now I'm going to duplicate this layer, shift it a few frames forward, and make sure that I have my track matte options available, so toggle the switches if you don't have them available. And here are my track matte options, and I'm going to set the track matte to alpha inverted. And so we've got a hole in our cloud, and so our cloud disappears after just a few frames. We still have got this little outline over here, so let's create the top cloud layer. Click S and make sure that it scales not to 100% but to 101. And so we will not have this annoying outline over here. We can also duplicate this set of layers and maybe offset them one frame and make this inner one not blue but white to create some more detail. So you have a flash of bluish color and then everything becomes white. Another nice way to create a cloud of smoke is using particular. If you have this plugin, you can create this effect. I'm going to create a new comp and again call it smoke cloud number 2. Create a new solid. I'm going to call it smoke and make it a black solid. From the FT toolbar script, I'm going to add my particular effect, and in the effect controls panel, I'm going to open the emitter section and keyframe the particles per second, move a few frames forward, and make sure that the particles per second is set to 0. And so we have a few particles emitting, as you can see. I'm going to open the particle section and decrease the sphere feather to 0 and increase the size random. So we have a few particles which look like this. I'm also going to decrease the life which is measured in seconds to like 0.75, so it disappears before my comp ends. I'm going to open the size over life and select this kind of graph, so their size simply decreases. I'm going to duplicate this layer and move it a few frames forward. Maybe change the color of the particles to yellow or orange. I'm also going to change the random seed, so we have a different arrangement for our particles. Maybe change the size a bit and increase the velocity so they expand a bit more. I'm also going to make sure that I have more particles created at the beginning, so I'm going to increase the particles per second to 200s. And if you don't see it updates in your preview, you can go to edit, purge, and all memory and disk cache, and once you purge it, it will automatically update and you will have your updates visible on your screen. This is another way to create a fun looking smoke cloud. Let's now have a look at other transitions rather than the flashes. So I'm going to create a new composition, Ctrl N on the keyboard, and I'm going to call it 01 just because I don't have an original name for this. And I'm still working in 1080p, and this time I'm going to use a 2 seconds long comp and click OK. Right here I'm going to select my pen tool and create a rectangle which looks like this. Very simple shape. And I'm going to open the contents and keyframe the path at the beginning of the timeline. Move 10 frames forward, select this top corner and start moving it. After another 10 frames, I'm going to move the bottom corner and leave the top one at its place. And just keep doing this and moving, adding keyframes and moving the relevant corners. till you fill up the whole screen with your shape. And so you have a transition which looks like this. It happens pretty slowly, so again I'm going to select all of my keyframes and holding Alt on the keyboard I'm going to squeeze them together, and now it happens much faster. I'm going to duplicate this shape and change its color to maybe be a bit brighter and offset it in time, just a few frames, and it looks like a walking shape, like your shape simply walks across the screen and it has only two joints. That's one option for a simple transition. Let's now create a new comp, and I'm going to select the rectangle tool this time, and I'm going to create a rectangle like this, deselect it, create another one like this, deselect it, another one like this, and deselect it, and create one which fills this empty space like this. So we have 4 rectangles. You can create as many as you like. I'm going to change their colors just so they are visible to me. And I'm going to click S on the keyboard and keyframe the scale property for all of these shapes. Move 10 frames forward, keyframe it again, and another 10 frames forward and keyframe it again. Now set the first and the last keyframe for all of these shapes to be 0. And so you have something which looks like this. I'm going to offset the shapes just a little bit. And so it goes like this. And your attempt is to try and have a few frames where the whole screen is covered with your shapes. And if you don't have it, just offset them the right time so you do have it. You can also select all of the scale keyframes and easy ease them. Right click keyframe assistance, easy ease. Once you pick up the right colors for these rectangles, this transition looks very nice and it's very simple to achieve, as you can see. I'm going to rename the composition to be 02. A third option for another transition is going to be using only one shape layer and just a few keyframes to its shape path. I'm going to select the pen tool and create a few points over here at the top, and then simply close it like this. At the beginning of the timeline, I'm going to keyframe the path, move a few frames forward, select one of these points, and start moving the points like this. Move a few frames forward again, move this one and maybe this one. A few frames forward again, and just keep moving your points so it looks like the solid is walking again. Every time you keep a set of keyframes static so they don't move. Like you see, those two keyframes are not moving now, and then they will move, and the other keyframes won't. And then you simply finish your animation by moving everything and covering your screen. I'm going to place my keyframes closer together. Now let's watch the animation. I'm going to easy ease all of these keyframes as well. Right click with all of them selected, keyframe assistance, easy ease. You can create a few duplicates of this shape and maybe alternate the keyframes, make it look a little bit different, maybe make the shape a bit different to create some interesting detail in your animation. And I think that these are plenty of elements to get you up and running with this kind of animation. You've learned how to create a number of transitions and elements which you can incorporate in your own videos. Hopefully you will find everything in this tutorial useful. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me in the comment section below. I'll be really glad if you check the other tutorials on this site and maybe let us know what tutorial you would like to see. I'm Daniel Brodeski for LesterBanks.com, and I'll see you next time.